Greetings all, Ferrari 601 here. Well, here's a little bit of a change of pace for everybody. Welcome to Prepared, and welcome to the cold and dark cockpit of a McDonnell Douglas MD-80. We're sitting here on the apron of runway 4 left at Newark Liberty International Airport. This happens to be my home airport in the city limits of Newark, New Jersey. For those of you who don't know, Newark is not a particularly nice place to be, and I don't recommend spending any time there, and that includes the airport. It is one of the worst airports in the entire world. Believe it or not, they quite consistently rank at the top of the list in terms of delays. Regardless, we are in Prepared, or P3D as it is also known, due to the stylized rendering of the name Prepared with the number 3 instead of that second E at the end of the word. This is a very realistic flight simulator put out by Lockheed Martin, of all people. Yes, you'll notice that a lot of this looks quite similar to the Microsoft Flight Simulator days, as air traffic control bumbles along in the background behind us there. A lot of the architecture in this sim does appear to be borrowed from Flight Simulator, particularly FSX, the last in the Microsoft Flight Simulator franchise, but yeah, it's a completely new sim, and it is very, very cool. This MD-80, this is an add-on. This is the Mad Dog MD-80, and it is an absolutely fantastic airplane. You can see we have switches and buttons and dials galore in this cockpit, well over 100 of them in all. And you can also see everything is dark in here. We are not powered up at all. What we're going to do today is just fly this thing very badly and just do some sightseeing around the New York area. First off, we got to get some power in this bad boy. So over here is our battery switch. We'll turn that on, and the airplane starts to come to life, doing all of its self-checks and things of that nature. However, it's a little bit more complicated than just starting your car. As you can see here, we have a lot of things to turn on. So that's what we're going to start to do. We can't just fire up the engines and take off. No, no, no. We have procedures to go through. So, an airplane, when it's on the ground and the engines are off, gets its power from batteries, external power supplies, or an auxiliary power unit. Yeah, in the tail end of this aircraft, there is an auxiliary power unit. As you can see, here's the back end of the plane, and you can see some vents there along the tail section of the fuselage. Yep, those are the intakes and exhausts for the auxiliary power unit housed in the back there. It is a small jet engine. It's a gas turbine engine, and it just provides some electrical power and hydraulic pressure for us. We have to get that thing started. So, our battery is on. Here's the switch for the start pump. That is going to give us fuel pressure for the auxiliary power unit, because it is a jet engine after all. It does need fuel. Master switch for the APU. It goes into its run position for a couple of seconds, and then we will punch it up. Let's hit start, and we should see the APU starting to spool up. There it is. We're getting a spool up on the APU, and exhaust gas temperature, that's the dial to the left of the RPM gauge there. You can see EGT, exhaust gas temperature, it's coming up. And it looks like the APU has a good start. It'll come up to about 95% of total RPM before we will see this blue light come on here. And there we go. APU power is available, and we will bring this airplane to life.
Autopilot.
Alright, so now we've got some electricity on board. That's going to enable us to do a few very important things. Our autopilot there going through its startup sequences. First thing we've got to do, let's bring up some displays, shall we? Everything is still configuring itself here, so we're not going to get any data yet coming through, but that will change in due course. Just getting our displays worked up here. There we go. We're going to go into the right-hand seat, the co-pilot seat here, and we'll do the same on this side. We'll get all of these displays up and running so that we can get some data from them when we are underway. You can see now that they have gone through their startup sequences, and we've actually got some proper instrumentation. Very good. Also, what we've got to do is we have to open up bleed air valves. Now, the APU, in addition to providing us with electrical power, it's also providing us with air pressure, and this is air pressure that we need to do a whole host of things. First of all, we need air pressure to pressurize the cabin and to run our air conditioning systems. So over here we have our air conditioning controls. So this is what's going to provide us with cabin pressure, and also it's going to provide us with climate control and air with which to spin the engines over. You can see here we open up these switches and we are going to get APU air pressure coming through. Turn that system on, and now you can see we have got some air pressure coming through. You see there, if I turn it off, the gauges go down. So that's what's providing us with climate control as well as with pressurization for the cockpit and the passenger cabin. So you can see there we can manipulate our temperature there in the cockpit and in the cabin. All of that is well and good, but we need to start the engines first. We need all the air coming through the APU to make this happen. So we'll turn off our packs there, our air packs for the cabin and cockpit. And we opened those bleed valves earlier, so all the air coming through the APU, we can use it to start our engines. So what we need to do at this point, we will go back into the left-hand seat, into the pilot seat, and right here, zooming in on these are our gauges for the engines. So you can see we have 4 gauges per engine. This is a twin-engine aircraft. And then to the right of that panel, we have the air temperature there. It's our outside air temperature right now. It's 15 degrees C. We have fuel temperature. We have oil pressure, oil temperature, oil quantity, hydraulic pressure, and hydraulic quantity. You'll notice that the oil pressure there on the right engine is slightly higher than on the left, 1 psi instead of 0. The APU is running off of the right-hand system here for the fuel tanks and all that stuff. So, fire up these engines. We need to turn on our fuel pumps. Going to turn on the pumps in all of the tanks because we have fuel in all of the tanks. 3 aft tanks and 3 forward tanks there, so 3 pumps per fore and aft. And with the fuel pumps on, we have our air packs turned off. We'll turn on our engine ignition. We'll turn off our start pump for the APU. We don't need that anymore. We'll arm our emergency lights. We'll turn on the no smoking and seatbelt signs. We'll turn on our pitot heat. That'll just keep any icing from occurring. We'll start up the engines one at a time. The APU can't start both engines at once. Open the air valve there, so now we're blowing air into the left-hand engine, and you can see that we have some RPM indicated now. We'll wait for 20% on that lower gauge there, and we'll open up our fuel valve. We'll send fuel into that left-hand engine. We have fuel flow, and now the engine has lit up. There you go. That little bell you heard, that is a power transfer. Now the left-hand engine is running the entire aircraft. The APU is now only providing us with air pressure to start the right-hand engine. Go through the instrumentation there on the engines. You will see we have the top ring. That's showing us our overall percentage of rated thrust on the engine. Down in the second from the top, that's N1. That is our total RPM there on the engine. That's showing us the big fan on the outside. That is our main RPM there for engine output. EGT, the second from the bottom, that's exhaust gas temperature in degrees C. And then N2, those are the compressor blades. That's the compressor stage on the engine. That is showing us our percentage of RPM, obviously running at about 52.5 out of 100. The numbers at the bottom, that is fuel flow, and that is in pounds per hour, I believe. We have that left-hand engine started, so we can close the start valve. We're just blowing air into it needlessly now. We'll now do the same on the right engine. Open the start valve. We'll watch the RPM come up. And again, we'll wait for the right-hand engine there to hit about 20% of N2 RPM. We'll open up the fuel. We have fuel flow and exhaust gas temperature coming up. The engine is lit off. Close the start valve, and we'll just allow the right-hand engine to stabilize. It'll stabilize right around where the left-hand engine has come up. You'll notice we've been talking about this for 10 minutes now, and at this point we have the engine started. It takes a little while to power up an airplane. We've got the engine started. We'll check that our power transfer has occurred. You'll see that the two blue lights here on the APU buses, they have extinguished. Therefore, the engines are now running the aircraft with their engine-driven generators. So we don't need the APU power anymore. We'll keep the APU running for a little while though. Over here on this panel, now we can turn on our air packs again because we don't need that APU air pressure. So now we will have air conditioning and cabin pressure. We can also turn off the APU air. And you'll see exhaust gas temperature on the APU will drop off a bit as we do that. There you go. We don't need that APU air anymore. Engines are doing all of that for us. At this point, we'll head back over to the right-hand seat. A couple more switches that we need to throw back here. You'll see here, this panel, hydraulic pumps, engine, low, high, off. We'll turn them on high. We need to build hydraulic pressure, and you see hydraulic pressure here building up, 31 psi on the right and 29 on the left. That's all nominal. That's going to give us hydraulic pressure because we use hydraulic fluid for our control surfaces on this aircraft. Obviously, all of the control surfaces on the wings and on the horizontal and vertical stabilizers here, that's what's going to be giving us flight control. It's a pretty important thing to have. I always need flight control for some reason. Anyway, other things that we will do. We have our engines on, so we will turn on some exterior lights, turn on our position and strobe lights, we'll turn on our anti-collision lights, and that's about it. Engines are running. You want some lights on so people know, hey, this plane is doing things. Now, coming back up to this panel, we don't need the APU anymore. We'll turn off the APU buses. We'll turn on our galley lights, so back there in the kitchen they can see what's going on, assuming we have passengers on board who are hungry. Go to auto there on our air packs. We don't need the APU anymore, so we will shut that down. And that will spool down all by itself in another minute or so. It's a shutdown sequence that it has to go through and make sure things cool down. Meanwhile, down here, these two main levers you can see in the middle, they're just moving slightly. Those are the throttles for the engines. Here off to the left, we have controls for our trim as well as our speed brake. Speed brake there going back and forth. Those are our speed brakes, our air brakes. These are flaps that will be deployed from the wings that will add a little bit more drag to slow us down when we're in flight. Over here, these two indicators and levers. These are our trim indicators. These will manipulate the attitude of the aerodynamic surfaces, the control surfaces on the wings and on the tail in order to stabilize our pitch as we are going along here. Long trim here is set to 3, which means that we need to be moving our vertical stabilizer there in the back. We need that to come down to D10-3 so that we can maintain a straight and level attitude in flight. Next thing we will do is we will set up our autopilot a little bit. We're going to hold 3,000 feet. And in order to get there, we're going to set up a rate of climb of 1,000 feet per minute. We're also going to get ourselves set up to hold a constant speed with our auto throttle system. So again, once we are off the ground, we'll get the computer to fly the plane for the most part. Gonna hold 200 knots. We're going to be below 10,000 feet. So therefore, we have a 250 knot speed limit. And our heading indicator, I'm showing 039 right now on our runway heading. So that's what we're going to dial in off the deck here. So when we take off, we will hold runway heading. Let's dial that in, 039. There it is. We'll get our vertical speed back up to where we want it. Flight director switches. This is telling the onboard computers, hey, we want to be doing this when we get airborne. And the autopilot will know what to do. Prepping the aircraft for takeoff. Trailing edge flaps on the wings. Going to bring them down to 11 degrees for takeoff. And there we go. You can see it back here, our flaps indicator down here showing 11. It's 11 degrees. That is very much an abbreviated version of the power-up procedure, but we are holding up some traffic behind us, so we best get moving here. You can see the window opens up. Very cool. We're going to want to close that, though, before takeoff. Very nice. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's everything I want to be doing before we fly this thing. All that remains to do is release the parking brakes, throttle the engines up. We're going to get a caution and warning call out from the onboard computer. That's fine, we can ignore that. Full thrust, and away we go.
Butt lab. Butt lab. Butt lab.
Engines are spooling up.
Butt lab.
Airspeed is going to be coming alive.
Butt lab. Butt lab.
Airspeed is alive.
Butt lab.
80 knots.
Butt lab.
There's 100 knots.
Butt lab. Butt lab.
There's 120.
Butt lab. Butt lab. Butt lab.
And we're pitching up.
Butt lab. Butt lab.
And we're off the deck.
Positive rate.
Show a positive climb. Landing gear coming up, bringing the flaps up.
Gear up. Lights out.
Throttling the engines back a little bit. Under manual control at the moment. Just holding runway heading. And we're going to set up the autopilot pretty much now. Autopilot on.
Altitude. Altitude. Altitude.
Hold 1,000 feet per minute in our rate of ascent. Auto throttle arm and hold the speed of 200 knots. Set it up to hold our heading at 039. We're already at 4,300 feet, as you can see. Pitch control got away from me a little bit there. Off the deck, that's okay. Let's descend at 1,000 feet per minute.
Stabilizer motion. Landing gear. Landing gear.
You can ignore that landing gear caution there. We are not landing.
Landing gear.
Slats for track.
And over there, you can see central Manhattan. Very, very cool. We're going to be doing some orbits around Manhattan. Descending at 1,000 feet per minute. That's what we've dialed in on the autopilot. We're going to get to 3,000 feet and then level off. Let's go down to 1,600 feet per minute on our rate of descent. Just get back down to our cruising altitude a little bit more quickly. There's 3,800 feet coming through it now. 230 knots indicated. This flashing orange light next to the altimeter, that's just telling me that I'm above my altitude that I've assigned into the autopilot. Obviously, I know that. It doesn't mean that we have any problem. Coming down to the altitude that I want. So we're going to dial in 0 on our vertical speed indicator. And it's going to hold us right there at about 3,100 feet. I want to come down a little bit more. I want to descend a little bit more so we get down to more or less 3,000 feet where we want it to be. All that is well and good. That's close enough, 3,040 some odd feet. There it is. Airspeed is 260 knots. Again, that is a bit higher than we want. Engines have throttled back. Speed's up to 250 knots there. Don't understand why that happened. There we go, commanded 200 knots. And we are slowing it down. That's good. Now looking at the left side, yep, you can see this is the topography in northern New Jersey there. Kittatinny Mountains coming in, Appalachians farther off. And then we're going up the Hudson River on this side. Very cool geography, honestly, in this part of the country. Not so cool in terms of the urban sprawl around here, but yeah, some cool landforms around here nonetheless. We've slowed down more or less to where we need to be. Let's do a little bit of a right turn. Let's see, this view is going to be a little easier to dial in that turn. Let's turn it off to the right. And there we go. Pretty cool views out the window. See very far north in Manhattan now. Up toward the Palisades area, New Jersey. Crossing the river into New York. Very nice. That's I believe this is supposed to be the George Washington Bridge. Not the best rendering of it, perhaps, but I think that's what this is supposed to be. George Washington Bridge is a suspension bridge. This is most certainly not a suspension bridge. Let's see. Let's give us a turn. Dial in 170. We'll sort of fly down Manhattan here. I'm pretty sure in reality all of this airspace is very heavily regulated and restricted, but we don't have to worry about too much of that right here. Pile in a little bit more of a turn. And there you go, you get a good sense of the geography here. The buildings will all load up, as we've restricted the draw distance a bit just to help the frame rates out. But you can definitely recognize this as New York City, that's for sure. It's one thing I really do like about flight sims. It's that, well, you can go pretty much anywhere in the world and see things that, well, you're used to seeing in reality, if you so desire. We are at 3,000 feet here, so we don't have to worry about any obstacles in the terrain. Nothing like that. It's flying down the river. This is, obviously out this window, this is the Hudson River. If we go outside the aircraft, you can see things a bit better. All right, there's the George Washington Bridge. We were farther north than I thought we were. That obviously is the suspension bridge. Anyway, this, believe it or not, quite similar to the view that Captain Sullenberger probably saw as he was losing both of his engines at this point, trying to figure out where do I put my aircraft down? Do I attempt to land it someplace in Manhattan, or do I go on the Hudson River? And he chose the Hudson River, and he chose wisely. No such problems like that for us today, though. And also get a chance to look at our airplane. Looks very nice. This model is fantastic. This is in the McDonnell Douglas factory livery, I believe. MD-80, obviously an old aircraft now. Not too many of them are still in service, but they are still in limited service, and they are very, very nice aircraft. Right here, off the starboard side of the plane, that is Central Park in Manhattan. Very famous local landmark, of course. Let's see if we can do a flyover of Central Park. Gonna have to make this a pretty tight turn considering our proximity to it. But again, all these maneuvers now being done by the autopilot. I'm just commanding it and supervising it. There's our wing view, looking around. Can we see? Yep, this should take us directly over Central Park. Gotta say, most of the detail in there looks very nice, and if you look closely on the ground, you can see we've got cars running around on those roads. The detail in this, it's not photorealistic, but it looks convincing enough. And the higher up you get, the better it looks as well, obviously. I want to do a flyover of Lower Manhattan, so we'll do a little bit of a turn. Here's Central Park. And over there, I believe that's supposed to be the Museum of Natural History. It looks like it's in Central Park. It's actually across the street from it. But there it is. Very cool. And of course the Empire State Building coming up. Very, very cool. See if we can sort of thread this needle between the tip of Manhattan and the Statue of Liberty. There we go. There's the Empire State Building. Keeping our distance, of course. Back in the 1930s or early 1940s, a military aircraft, a bomber, actually crashed into the Empire State Building, flying low and slow, lost in the fog. And here the southern end of Manhattan. Very cool. Very, very cool. Right here, this is, these buildings haven't been updated. This is now where One World Trade Center is. There you go. You can see roughly how everything is there. But One World Trade Center is now here. That has not been added here in the model. And then coming across, here is Ellis Island on the New Jersey side of the river, and the Statue of Liberty as well. You can also see some boats in the water. Very cool. So Ellis Island there, and then Liberty Island, obviously, with the Statue of Liberty on it. Very, very nice to see all this stuff. Obviously, flying this low around New York City, it's not something that civilian aircraft are allowed to do, really, unless you're one of those sightseeing helicopters. But yeah, definitely makes for some cool photo opportunities. Coming across here. On this side, this is Staten Island. This is part of New York City. And this is the Verrazano Narrows and the Verrazano Bridge. And then this is Brooklyn. Again, these are all areas where I've been and know pretty well. And flying through the Verrazano Narrows. We'll just come over Staten Island a little bit and make a turn off closer to due south. Here's Staten Island Expressway coming across the Verrazano Bridge. Costs $16 to cross this bridge, just want to let you know. You pay coming from the Staten Island side. Yes, it's exorbitant. But yeah, there it is. I've also traveled under this bridge several times on ships. It's a pretty spectacular sight no matter which way you cross it. Well, if this is the Staten Island side and later on the New Jersey side. Right here, this little protrusion of land, that's a place we call Sandy Hook. That's a beach, and there's also a Coast Guard station still there, still manned, still technically a military base, and it is actually a national park. We'll fly down 180, we'll head due south. Get a little bit closer to Sandy Hook. It's really a very, very cool place. Obviously, growing up, this is where we went to the beach, things like that. I live quite near this area. And also, there is a local running club that I'm a member of, and we meet up at Sandy Hook. So, yeah, very cool. 165, get a little bit closer to the hook, and we'll fly down the coastline a little bit. I like the reflections in the water or the clouds. Looks like we have HDR as well, high dynamic range with automated exposure. Here's the tip of Sandy Hook. Unfortunately, we don't have any detail of what's on the hook itself, but it's not just a desolate landscape. Here's a Coast Guard station here, as I mentioned, and this whole area was actually a gun battery in the Spanish-American War, and they put big cannons here to defend New York City, and you could see the proximity to Manhattan, really, and it's a harbor entrance as well, so you could understand why they would want to put guns here to defend the harbor. So there are still remnants of those forts from the Spanish-American War, and they were also manned in World War I and World War II. So actually quite a bit of history here on Sandy Hook as well. And you can see here, we're now well and truly over New Jersey. You can see the topography of this area. Lots of watersheds here from the Raritan and Navesink rivers. And of course, Sandy Hook and all of the surrounding areas, little towns, the Atlantic Highlands, the areas called Seabright, for example, they're all on barrier islands. And when we had Hurricane Sandy around here in 2012, all of these areas were entirely inundated with the ocean coming over the land there, storm surge. Getting a little bit of turbulence there. Aircraft responded normally. Coming down the coastline. Sandy Hook is now behind us for the most part. There are some stupendous looking bridges in this area. Here's the one that you would take to go down Sandy Hook. Very cool. It's the Navesink River. I live quite close to this area. Very cool to fly around places that you actually know. Again, in terms of the detail that you get, it's not perfect, but I definitely recognize the way the land looks. If I'm not mistaken, this would be the town of Red Bank. Used to work in this area. Only about 15 minutes from my house. Very cool. This whole area dominated by small towns. For the most part, we don't have big cities in this part of the state. Little place I mentioned, Red Bank, that's what we would call a city in this place. Still only about, I don't know, 15,000 people, 20,000 people live there. All in all, not too bad. And then, of course, the Atlantic Ocean. And, yeah, someplace well over that way is Spain. And a little bit more over that way, there's the British Isles. So, yeah. You can just generally see here we have shoreline punctuated as you head farther south by more barrier islands and inlets and things like that, river deltas. So yeah, that's basically my native topography. Very, very cool. And you can just see the Verrazano Bridge there in the background. Nice. And actually, I will say, when you go out to sea, you can, like if you're on a ship and you're headed out into the Atlantic or down toward the Caribbean, you could see the Verrazano Bridge on the horizon for hours after you leave the harbor. And depending on how the atmosphere is and how the time of day is, you can actually see the bridge. It appears to be above the horizon sometimes when it's actually below it, as you've gone far enough away with the Fata Morgana mirage effect. It's very striking. Anyway, we're headed down now offshore a bit. We're heading into the areas of Eatontown and Long Branch. Went to school down here in this area. And then further south you get into places like Asbury Park, Belmar, places that maybe some of you know. Anyway, we're going to head back north. Because what I'd like to do is head back to Newark. You can see here we're only doing 220 knots, which is pretty slow in terms of airplanes, but when you're not hindered by roads or anything like that, you can cover a lot of ground pretty quickly, even at a relatively low speed. So we'll fly inland for a little while. Coming back across the shoreline. We'll fly over the Raritan Bay, which is the little spit of ocean you can see coming in toward the state there, just sort of cutting it in half, at least from our vantage point. That's the Raritan Bay, is really the Atlantic Ocean coming in. Raritan River leads into it. And flying over the Garden State Parkway right now, you see the big roadway below us? That's the Garden State Parkway. It's basically an interstate highway. Cuts the state in half from north to south. Everybody who's from New Jersey or has spent any time in New Jersey knows your parkway exits. We kind of identify where we're from based off of our parkway exits. So if you know where exit 117 or exit 114 are, well, you know generally where I'm from. We'll make a turn toward the north. And we'll look for Newark Airport actually coming up pretty soon. Runway heading was 039, if you remember from when we started this whole extravaganza. So we don't exactly want to dial that in yet. We'll head for true north. 000 on the compass. It's flying north. There's the parkway. Again, it cuts roughly north to south through New Jersey. Coming through here. It's the area of Cheesequake and Matawan. Recognize that bridge in the background there. Sort of zoom in on the background. A little strip right behind us. Those are, yep. Yeah, the roads basically follow where they actually go. That's a little drawbridge, an area called Lawrence Harbor. Crosses this body of water, which we call the Cheesequake Creek. It's really a little bay. And there's the parkway again. As it heads into South Amboy, and then it'll cross a bridge called the Driscoll Bridge into Perth Amboy and Woodbridge, where it heads farther north into Clark, and then later on goes much farther north, all the way up until you get into New York. There's the bridge over the over the Raritan River, Parkway Bridge over the Raritan. Pan up a little bit. There it is. Right there. It's a lot higher than that in reality. It's called the Driscoll Bridge. It's actually the largest. Yeah, it's the largest fixed span bridge in the world in terms of its width. I think it serves 12 lanes. We have a lot of cars in this state. One of our problems is traffic congestion, and well, that's one of the ways that we deal with it. You build the widest bridge in the world. Going to be coming up toward Newark Airport very shortly. We look out our main windows here. Be able to see it coming up. Want to do slow down. Hold 175. The engines will throttle back. There's the airport. We'll land on runway 4 right.
2500.
There it is. Disarm the auto throttles. Auto throttle disarmed. Throttling the engines back. Leveled out. Disconnect the autopilot. We've got manual control. coming up on the runway pretty soon. Speed still about 220 knots. And there's the airport directly ahead of us. New Jersey Turnpike is the road that we're running adjacent to, basically parallel to at the moment. Going to extend our slats. Those are the leading edge slats on the wings, give us a little bit more drag as well as to give us some lift. It's 1,000 feet. We'll bring our flaps to 11 degrees. Those are our trailing edge flaps. We'll drop the landing gear. Outer Bridge Crossing is the bridge that we're about to pass there. Yes, the planes really do fly this low over this section of road. Landing gear is down and locked. Speed brakes are out. I understand that. It's just letting me know, hey, your speed brake's out.
400.
400 feet. Getting a little bit of crosswind.
300.
300 feet.
Too low, flaps. 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 Too low, flaps.
140, 30, 20, 10.
And main gear is down. Nose gear is down. Thrust reversers. No brakes, just thrust reversers. Thrust reversers off, now we'll get the wheel brakes in. Turn off the runway. Notice we did not talk to air traffic control at all. That was very illegal, but hey, doesn't matter. We'll just bring the plane to a stop right here, because why not? We'll cause more of a traffic headache for everybody involved. But we do have the plane off the runway. There's the road traffic behind us, pretty cool. And for the sake of continuity, we will power it down. So we'll turn our battery back on. Actually, we never turn it off. That's something we forgot from the beginning. Turn on our start pump for the APU. Bring it to run. We actually did bring it to start there momentarily. I don't know if that was enough. It was. APU is spooling up. This way we won't lose all electrical power when we shut the engines down. We'll have the APU ready to go to take over. Just about there. power available. Open up the APU bus circuit breakers. We'll shut off the generators from the engines. Now the APU is running the aircraft. We'll shut down our engines. We'll cut the fuel flow to the engines and turn them off. Fuel is cut on both engines and they're spooling down. Fuel flow is at 0, and obviously RPM and exhaust gas temperatures dropping off as you would expect. So the engines are spooling down. Also means that we'll lose hydraulic pressure for the most part. We still have some hydraulic pressure thanks to the APU being on. These hydraulic pumps, we will shut them off. The auxiliary pump off. Hydraulic pressure now dropping down slowly but steadily. Some residual pressure still in the lines. Those air packs that we talked about before, running them off of the APU. See, with the APU air turned on, we'll still have air running through the system, but we'll turn all of them off. We'll shut down the APU air, we don't need it. We'll close our bleed air cross feeds. We don't need to be supplying the engines anymore. We'll shut off our fuel pumps. Shut off our pitot heat, disarm our emergency lights, turn off the seat belt, no smoking signs, shut off the galley power. Parking brake is set. We'll shut down the APU buses. Airplane's powered down. Turn off our ignition system for the engines. And we'll shut down the APU. That'll shut off momentarily. Let's wait for that to spool down. That'll happen in a few seconds. Just waiting for it to drop off. Again, it goes through a shutdown procedure there. Shutdown protocol, all automatic, just so that things don't get too hot once rotation stops. And there we go. APU is off and spooling down. The last thing we'll do is turn off the battery, and that's it. Aircraft now cold and dark once again, as we found it. Very, very cool. This is a great simulation of the MD-80 and Prepar3d. Great, absolutely great flight simulator. You know, I got my start with simulation games with flight sims of one kind or another, and it's cool to come back to them every once in a while. Reminds me of why I like simulator games just as an overall genre, because you get to do things that are realistic, but you know that you'll never get the chance to do them in reality. So yeah, be able to fly an older airplane like this around places that I know very well from real life, yeah, very, very cool. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this little change of pace, everybody, and I don't know, maybe we'll see some more content from P3D in the days and weeks to come. But thank you very much for joining me on our little sightseeing flight around the New York, New Jersey metro area. Until next time, Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.